fun now. Good. Welcome. It's good to see you. The slides for this talk are over at this little bit.ly URL that you see here. It's bit.ly/dot is fun. Dot is one of the languages that's available in Graphviz. It's the language that most people use when they say that they're using Graphviz for something. And the whole point of Graphviz is to quickly and easily make some diagrams. So here's our tour guide plan for Graphviz today. We're going to start with a very simple example and some notes about the Graphviz whole ecosystem. And I'm going to give you a little teaser about Jupyter Notebooks. Preview, I want to do a talk on Jupyter Notebooks one of these days. And then we're going to have a tour of the dot language and a very quick walkthrough of a complex example. So here's a very simple example of Graphviz. We have a graph. Oops, look out. We have a graph, digraph G, and it's got A that goes to B, and that's it. It's super simple. And one of the things that I love about the Graphviz ecosystem is there is this web application called graphviz.it, and they're having a little bit of problem with their SSL at the moment, but it is Graphviz inside of a web browser. So you don't have to install anything. And every time you go to it, they'll give you a brand new, fresh example. And if you click gallery, it'll generate another example for you, and on and on and on it will go. And then of course you can click new diagram, and you can then point out that Graphviz is fun, easy, and Ron should use it. So back to the slides. Graphviz.org is the official homepage. AT&T produced Graphviz almost 30 years ago, and it's open source using the Eclipse public license. There's plugins for practically everything. VS Code is one of the more popular editors these days, so you can get a plugin for VS Code. In fact, there are several. It's really nice. You can change the source code, and then on another pane, there'll be a preview of things. Of course, there's command line usage, and you can even use Graphviz from inside many, many different programming languages. And because Graphviz is 30 years old, it's very easy to find examples and tutorials on the internet. So here's the teaser that I spoke about. Jupyter Notebooks are a way to write Python programs right inside of a web browser. And Google provides one called Collab. It's an implementation of Jupyter Notebooks. And you can see here on the right, we're doing a from Graphviz import digraph. And once we've done that, we can make a new digraph called G, and then add an edge that goes from the node hello to the node world. And finally, we can, and that displays a graph for us, and so on. So it's possible to use Graphviz just by writing the code in the web browser or in a text file. It's also possible to use it from programming languages. So here starts our tour. It's not a 3-hour tour. It would be more like a 3-minute tour. So as you know, there are nodes and edges. So there's a wide variety of attributes that nodes can have. You can have a label. So inside of your code, you might have a short name for something like A or fun, and then you might have a longer name that actually is displayed on the image that's produced. And you can use a subset of HTML in this label, so you can get really creative about what you see. You can even label nodes with images, so you can have pictures of people and things like that. You can do different colors for the node or vertex. You can have fill effects and things like that. And for edges, you can also label the edges, and you can also color the edges. So an example of coloring the edges in order to show a path you see here in red. All right. More tour. We have attributes for the nodes, the edges, and we have attributes for the graph as a whole. The big ones to remember here are rank direction, which is it going from left to right or top to bottom, and rank. So in item number 3 in this wall of text, you see that the rank is the same for nodes A, B, and C, and that'll group them together is what will happen. So here's an example of using both rank direction. We start off with the direction of left to right for A and B, and then we have rank the same for nodes B and C. And so notice how it's putting them in the same column here. And sometimes in Graphviz, it's nice to, those are my dogs, they're defending the house. The node can be invisible, which is what's happening here. And then finally, we can have some more nodes D and E that are of the same rank as well. So that's a nice little example. And it's fun to play with this stuff. All right. Continuing the tour, clusters, officially known as subgraph. When a subgraph begins with a name that begins cluster underscore something, then it visually separates them. And here's an example of using this from a website called Sketchviz that modifies Graphviz to make it look like they're hand-drawn diagrams. Another thing that's really, really useful is the idea of records that you see here. Records have ports. So on line 6 of this source code, you see this label where it's A, B, and then C, where port 1 is C. And then later on line 13, we say, look, between structure 1, port 1, which is C, and structure 2, port 2, which is B1, we want to draw an arrow and we want to label this X, Y, Z. All right. Okay, now that we have this notion of rank and rank direction and invisible edges, let's look at this complex example. So notice how we have the years running down the left-hand side, and here are the years in the source code to the graph. And we run them down the left-hand side by making the year that the shell was put out have the same rank as the shell itself. So born shell, the predecessor to the born again shell, came out in 1976. And then in 1990, there was a riff on that guitar that created the born again shell. Other things that are interesting here is the use of quotations. So node names need to be kind of like a variable in a programming language. So you really can't have a dash inside of it unless you put it in quotes. And then the last thing that's interesting here is invisible edges. So here's a little reference. There's a billion different tools out there that use Graphviz, and here are just a smattering of them.